Have you ever wondered if reality isn't just shaped by simple positive thoughts, but is quietly engineered through rituals and the way we master ourselves and the deep energy within? For thousands of years, ancient civilizations have left behind countless traces of energy control, and from symbols and monuments to mysterious rituals known only to a select few. Among the most fascinating figures stands Thoth, the god of wisdom in ancient Egypt. Legends say Thoth not only held the knowledge of the universe, but also possessed the forbidden technique, the ultimate method to unlock, command, and transform human energy, directly influencing reality itself. This isn't about empty positivity or the usual affirmations you hear everywhere. Thoth revealed that energy is the most fundamental language of the universe. And when a person learns to tune their own energetic frequency, they don't just shift their mindset, they reprogram the flow of events and experiences in their life. In this video, we're going straight into the forbidden zone, where Thoth exposes the secret technique for mastering energy without any sugarcoating or fluff. No glamour, no pretenses, just the raw truth of how reality operates through frequency and ritual. If you truly want to understand how to control your life at its very core, this is where the journey begins. Are you ready to tap into the forbidden technique Thoth left behind? You were never taught how to use your own power. That wasn't an accident. From the very moment you could speak, the world began steering you away from it. You were told to sit still, to follow the rules, to trust systems that never understood the vast, infinite universe inside of you. They trained you to believe that energy lived outside yourself, in wires, in machines, in calories, in outlets, but never in your own breath, your own thought, your own will. But the ancients, they knew better. Among them was Thoth, the god of wisdom, time, and hidden knowledge. He didn't just leave behind myths and stories to entertain future generations. He left a method, a precise, intentional technique said to unlock the subtle force that governs all creation. Energy, not as a poetic metaphor, but as something tangible you can shape and control with focused intention and conscious awareness. For centuries, his teachings were safeguarded in mystery schools and deliberately buried under layers of suppression by empires that feared what would happen if people rediscovered their own power. Because Thoth taught a truth so radical, so world-shifting, that even now it challenges the very foundation of reality. Thought shapes reality. Frequency creates form. The human being is not a victim of life, but its architect. There's a reason the ancients never wrote instruction manuals. They encoded their wisdom in myth, symbol, and story, knowing that only those who were ready would truly see. Thoth was not just a mythological figure. He was said to be the architect of wisdom itself. The Greeks revered him as Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great. The legendary emerald tablets bear his name. Hidden within these cryptic texts are fragments of something astonishingly precise, something that looks less like religion and more like a technology of the mind. A system designed to work not just with energy, but as energy itself. This wasn't about worship. It wasn't about blind faith. It was about alignment. Thoth's teachings didn't beg you to believe. They demanded that you remember. They called you back to a truth buried so deep that even now it feels forbidden. The universe, at its core, is not made of matter. It is made of motion. Vibration is the root of everything. And the one who learns to direct vibration becomes a master of reality, not its servant. The ancient Hermetic axiom, all is mind, wasn't philosophical fluff. It was literal. Every form, every field, every phenomenon you see begins as a spark in consciousness. Matter doesn't create thought. Thought shapes matter. Consciousness is not a byproduct of the brain. It is the source of all existence. Your thoughts are not empty noise. They are blueprints. Every single one leaves an imprint on the field of reality. This is where Thoth's forbidden technique begins, not with external rituals or blind chants, but with the awakening of inner awareness. In his tradition, thought was a frequency. Intention was a force. Emotion was the carrier wave that amplified both. Together they formed a trinity capable of influencing energy fields inside and outside the body. This wasn't allegory. This was mechanics, a science of the unseen. And if you've ever felt the quiet pull of something greater, if you've ever sensed that reality itself responds to you in ways you can't quite explain, you've already brushed against it. The question now is, are you ready to stop being a passenger in your own life and take the seat of the architect? Thoth's teachings are not about belief. They are about remembering, and once you remember, reality itself begins to bend. You are a transmitter, whether you know it or not. The question is, are you transmitting consciously? The ancients believed that focused thought, pure and undiluted by fear or doubt, could shift the energetic structure of space. Matter is simply condensed energy, and energy responds to mind. This isn't a forgotten fantasy. It's a reality backed by modern insights into quantum fields, cymatics, and bioenergetics. The double-slit experiment showed that the presence of a conscious observer alters outcomes at the quantum level. Cymatics proves that frequency reorganizes matter, and studies in biofield science confirm that the body radiates a measurable electromagnetic signature that shifts with thought and emotion. But here's the part they never told you. You were conditioned not just to forget, but to mock this kind of knowledge, to label it pseudo, mystical, irrelevant. Not because it lacks truth, but because it holds too much of it. The more accurate the ancient systems turned out to be, the more urgently they were buried. The institutions that control modern thought don't fear superstition. They fear precision. And Thoth's technique was nothing if not precise. And once you begin to remember, the world you thought was solid begins to soften. Suddenly, your thoughts no longer feel random. Your breath begins to feel like a current. Your body stops feeling like a container and begins to feel like a receiver. The way you speak, the way you move, the way you direct your awareness, they all begin to reveal their true function, to command energy. You stop asking for life to change and start realizing you are the one changing it. So why was this hidden? Why were the teachings of Thoth sealed away in symbols and secrecy? Not to keep them from you, but to keep them from being misused. Because in the wrong hands, power becomes control, and in the right hands, it becomes liberation. This is why ancient initiates were tested before being given the teachings, not to gatekeep, but to ensure readiness. And now, those teachings are surfacing again, not in temples or tablets, but in your own remembering. You're not discovering them, you're uncovering what was always there. What if your thoughts weren't private? What if every time you worried, hoped, feared, or dreamed, you were broadcasting something into the fabric of reality itself? We've been trained to believe thought is invisible, that it happens in some hidden space between neurons, safe, abstract, and harmless. But thought is energy, and energy, by its nature, moves, vibrates, and interacts with everything it touches. When Thoth said, "All is mind," he wasn't being poetic. He was revealing the source code of reality. Every thought you think carries a frequency. The quality of that frequency depends on your emotional state, your level of focus, and your subconscious belief systems. A passing thought filled with fear vibrates low, chaotic, and weak. But a concentrated thought, fused with calm certainty, vibrates coherently and can influence the electromagnetic field around you. You are not just thinking inside your skull. You are creating subtle distortions in the energetic field that surrounds your body, what modern science now calls the biofield. Your mind doesn't end at your skin. It radiates. And this isn't just mysticism. It's measurable. EEG scans show brainwave frequencies fluctuate based on your thoughts and states of consciousness. Heart rate variability reveals how coherent emotional states, like gratitude and clarity, affect the heart's electromagnetic rhythm. That rhythm, in turn, influences the brain. It's a feedback loop. thought influencing feeling, feeling influencing energy, energy influencing thought. When they align, your internal system enters a kind of resonance, and your influence on the outer world becomes stronger. This is what Thoth knew. This is what was stripped from modern education, replaced with memorization and external validation. The ancients may not have had machines, but they had observation. They understood that when someone thought clearly with intention, their presence changed things. Crops grew better. Sickness shifted. Space felt different. Temples were built not just as places of worship, but as amplifiers of frequency. Every pillar, every shape, every sound was designed to manipulate energy. Sound chambers in Egypt weren't just echoing, they were tuning. And what was being tuned? You. But the most potent instrument of all wasn't stone or geometry. It was you. The human system, a complex, energetic organism capable of transmitting and receiving vibrational information. Your breath modulates the system. Your voice projects it. Your intention directs it. When you learn to align these elements, your thoughts stop being passive and become precision tools. Tools that, when focused, can affect more than just your mood. They can shift probability. We've been trained to treat our internal world like a side effect. But in truth, it's the origin point. Every outcome you've ever experienced started as a pattern of thought and emotion. Whether conscious or not, you didn't just end up where you are. You projected, repeated, and reinforced a frequency that matched it. Thoth's technique wasn't about magic. It was about mastery. Mastery of that internal frequency generator we've been taught to ignore. And that's the danger, isn't it? A person who realizes their thoughts shape their world becomes dangerous, not to others, but to the systems that depend on passivity. When you begin to consciously direct your attention, energy follows. And when energy follows, matter rearranges. It doesn't happen instantly. This isn't fantasy, but it happens inevitably. Energy moves first. Form follows. Second, that's the law. So when Thoth spoke of mind as the medium of creation, he was giving us the manual no one else would. He was telling us that to know yourself is to know the levers of the universe, not because you control the world, but because you tune yourself to it. And when the instrument is tuned, the song changes. We've been told to change the world by force, but the ancients knew better. The subtle always leads the gross. The invisible always directs the visible. And if your thoughts can move energy, and energy builds form, then the question isn't whether you're shaping your life, it's whether you're doing it consciously. You were born aware, sensitive, tuned in. As a child, you felt the world more than you understood it. You could sense tension in a room before a word was spoken. You stared at sunlight, fascinated by how it danced through dust. You imagined things, real things, and spoke to the invisible. That wasn't imagination. That was perception, raw and unfiltered. You hadn't yet been taught to block it out. You hadn't yet been told which senses were real and which ones were nonsense. But the system was patient. It didn't need to fight you. It just needed time. School came, not the learning kind, the conditioning kind. You were taught to sit still, speak only when spoken to, follow the schedule, and silence your inner world. Creativity became a subject, not a state of being. Curiosity became a liability. You stopped asking why. You stopped listening to your body. The bell told you when to think, when to move, when to stop. The lessons were less about math or language and more about obedience and rhythm, training your nervous system to respond to external command and energy. That wasn't part of the curriculum. Not the kind we're talking about. Sure, they taught you about fossil fuels and electricity, but not the bioelectrical field of your own body, not the electromagnetic frequency of your heart, not how your breath modulates your energy field, not how stillness sharpens perception, or how intention carries vibrational impact. That kind of energy was left out on purpose. Because if you learned to direct your energy, you wouldn't be easy to direct yourself. Instead, the system replaced awareness with noise. From school, you moved to the media. Cartoons, flashing lights, fast edits, algorithms designed to hijack your focus and scatter your attention. You were never taught how to control your thoughts, but you were fed millions of images designed to control them for you. Consumerism became culture. You learned to seek satisfaction from what you could buy, not what you could feel. You weren't taught to breathe. You were taught to scroll. But let's be clear, this isn't a glitch in the system. It is the system. Because a person trained to ignore their energy will always feel like something's missing. And that gap, that subtle ache, is what drives you to consume more, obey more, and question less. You stop looking inward and start looking outward for answers, never realizing that your own frequency has been hijacked. This is the brilliance of the system. It doesn't chain your body, it scrambles your signal. Think about it. Why is meditation a luxury instead of a basic skill? Why is breathwork considered alternative when it's the foundation of your nervous system? Why are the most effective energetic practices hidden behind spiritual cliches or buried in cultural stereotypes? It's because they work. They don't require apps, pills, or subscriptions. They can't be monetized, patented, or taxed. And worst of all, for those in power, they make you self-sufficient. A person who knows how to regulate their energy can't be manipulated by fear. A person who understands their thoughts affect their environment won't fall for the lie of helplessness. Someone in tune with their own frequency can feel the truth behind words and the deceit hidden in smiles. That's dangerous, not because it leads to rebellion, but because it leads to sovereignty. You become the author of your experience. The script no longer writes you, you begin writing it. So when people dismiss this knowledge as woo-woo or unscientific, understand where that reaction comes from. It comes from training. It comes from years of being taught that anything invisible is imaginary, that only the physical is real, and that expertise lives outside of you. But you don't need permission to access what's already yours. You need remembrance, you need unlearning. You need to reclaim the subtle awareness the system works so hard to dull. Because here's the truth. The energy has always been there. It didn't vanish. You were just trained to stop feeling it. The world you see is not the world as it is. It's the world as you've been taught to perceive it. And buried within the fragments of ancient teachings is a map out of that illusion. The Hermetic texts attributed to Thoth, under his Greek name Hermes Trismegistus, were never meant to be religious scripture. They were blueprints, coded instructions for decoding reality itself. But to the untrained eye, they look like poetry. To the indoctrinated mind, they seem like mysticism. That was the point. As above, so below. As within, so without. You've heard the phrase, maybe even quoted it. But have you ever felt what it actually means? It's not just a philosophical musing. It's an equation, a law. What happens in the seen reflects what's happening in the unseen. The universe is not a series of separate parts. It is a layered mirror. Your outer world reflects your inner frequency. Change one, and the other must follow. And yet, no one teaches this in science class. No one explains that your inner state is causative. Instead, you're taught to treat symptoms, fix outcomes, react to consequences. But Thoth's wisdom says, start upstream, start within. The Kybalion, one of the key Hermetic texts, outlines 7 principles, all flowing from a single truth. The universe is mental, not in a metaphorical sense, but in a literal one. All is mind. That means everything around you is being shaped by consciousness, not just your own, but the collective, cosmic, universal mind. This isn't ego-driven creationism. It's participatory alignment. When you tune your personal mind to the larger patterns through thought, breath, and intent, you no longer fight the current. You begin to steer with it. Look closer at ancient temples and mystery schools, and you'll see the same patterns repeated. Geometry, vibration, symbols of light and frequency. These weren't aesthetic choices. They were technologies. Sacred geometry was not decoration. It was energetic architecture. Every angle, Every ratio, every proportion was chosen to resonate with the human body, to amplify its field, to create coherence between the structure and the being inside it. These temples weren't built to impress the gods. They were built to tune humans. Even the language of alchemy, transmutation, purification, inner gold, was never about turning lead into precious metals. It was about turning the dense human into the luminous one. It was about refining energy through will, balancing the polarities within, and becoming a conscious vessel for the divine. That divine wasn't separate. It was the frequency of life itself, accessible through disciplined awareness and vibrational alignment. And all of this was hidden in plain sight, not because it was too complex, but because it was too powerful. If knowledge is power, then Hermetic wisdom is the code for self-mastery, and self-mastery dismantles dependency. If you no longer need permission to be well, if you no longer rely on external validation for meaning, if you can generate clarity, strength, and connection from within, then what can they sell you? What can they control? That's why these teachings were diluted, obscured, and eventually ridiculed. That's why the Kybalion is considered fringe, while conformity is called education. But truth doesn't vanish. It waits. It weaves itself into symbols, hides behind phrases, and waits for eyes that can see again. And if you've come this far, you're already beginning to remember. Because deep down, part of you knows this isn't new information. It's old truth resurfacing. Familiar, not because you read it, but because it was always there, coded into your body, your breath, your knowing. You don't need to understand every symbol or memorize every law. You just need to feel what's real. And when you do, the Hermetic principles stop being theory. They start becoming the lens through which you see everything. You stop reacting to life and begin reading it. The chaos becomes rhythm. The fear becomes signal. And you realize Thoth didn't come to mystify the world. He came to show you how to read it. Science, at its core, is meant to be the pursuit of truth. But when truth begins to challenge control, it gets quietly redirected, sanitized, categorized, discredited. You were told that anything ancient is unscientific, that if it can't be measured, it can't be real. But what happens when science begins to validate the very principles that were once mocked as mysticism? Suddenly the line between ancient wisdom and modern discovery begins to dissolve, and what was once called magic starts to look a lot like forgotten science. Quantum physics doesn't contradict Hermetic law. It confirms it. The double-slit experiment proves that the act of observation changes the behavior of particles. In other words, the presence of consciousness alters the outcome of reality. That's not philosophy, that's measurable. The observer effect isn't a theory, it's a doorway. It tells us that mind doesn't just experience matter, it interacts with it. And what Thoth said thousands of years ago, that thought shapes form, is echoed by physicists today, even if they don't always say it out loud. Scalar energy is another thread that bridges ancient knowledge and modern science. It doesn't move in waves like traditional electromagnetic fields. It's nonlinear, zero-point, and capable of penetrating solid matter without resistance. Sound familiar? That's the kind of energy Thoth described, one that exists beyond the visible, beyond space and time, influenced by intent and alignment. It's the energy of the void, the field that responds not to machinery, but to consciousness. The reason you don't hear about scalar energy in mainstream physics isn't because it lacks potential. It's because it has too much. Weapons have been theorized using it. Healing devices have been patented with it. And yet, you were never taught about it. Why? Because if energy can be influenced by thought, and if healing can occur through coherence, and if the body is not just physical but vibrational, then medicine changes. Power structures built on disease, dependency, and suppression start to collapse. And make no mistake, these systems are not built to empower. They're built to perpetuate themselves. Empowered people don't just think differently, They live differently. They don't buy what they don't need. They don't obey what doesn't resonate. They don't fear what they can understand. Even cymatics, the study of how sound frequencies shape matter, shows us that vibration is not abstract. It is form. Sound creates structure. Certain frequencies produce order. Others produce chaos. When you speak, your words aren't just sounds. They're vibrations. When you think, you're not just having internal dialogue. You're shaping subtle fields. The ancients used toning, chanting, breathwork, and silence to tune their systems like instruments. They weren't performing rituals for spectacle. They were aligning their inner frequency with the greater field. Today we call this alternative. But there's nothing alternative about truth, only forgotten. The real divide isn't between science and spirituality. It's between open inquiry and institutional control. True science is not afraid of what it doesn't yet understand. But corporate science, science owned, funded, and filtered through profit, can't afford discovery that disrupts the model. And models are what they protect, not truth. Because truth liberates, and liberation is bad for business. That's why someone like Thoth, who taught energy as a birthright and consciousness as the architect of form, was mythologized into obscurity. That's why vibrational medicine is framed as placebo, while chemical dependency is normalized. That's why you were taught that thinking is passive and matter is dominant. Because if the opposite were accepted, the entire hierarchy collapses. The lab coat becomes a tool, not a throne. The body becomes intelligent, not defective. The mind becomes creative, not chaotic. But you don't need permission to recognize resonance. You've felt it. You've walked into rooms that felt heavy for no reason. You've met people whose presence calmed you before they spoke. You've heard music that rearranged your emotions in seconds. You've had thoughts that seemed to shift your entire mood. These are not coincidences. They're clues, echoes, of a truth that predates modern systems. Truth that says energy is real, vibration is law, and consciousness is the interface. And when science stops protecting its models and starts following its own data, it will rediscover what the ancients already knew. Until then, the responsibility of remembering falls to you. The most dangerous knowledge is always hidden in symbols, not because it's vague, but because it protects the unready from misunderstanding it. Thoth's technique, often referred to in fragments across Hermetic texts and mystery school traditions, was never handed down as a step-by-step guide. It was encoded in geometry, embedded in ritual, whispered through metaphor, and guarded fiercely. For one reason, it worked. Not as metaphor, not as inspiration, but as a functional method for controlling energy consciously, intentionally, and with purpose. The ancients didn't separate the body from the spirit or the mind from the breath. They saw the human being as one continuous system, electrical, magnetic, vibrational, and conscious. Thoth's system worked within this framework. It wasn't about faith. It was about alignment. You became the instrument. And when you tuned it, precisely, you could interact with the field that shaped all form. In modern terms, you could alter the code. It always began with silence, not absence of noise, but absence of interference. The body had to be still, the breath unforced, the mind clear, not emptied but directed. The ancients didn't suppress thought, they mastered it. The first layer of this technique was about coherence. If your mind and body are in different places, your field is scattered. If your emotions are reactive, your signal is unstable. So the first phase was internal alignment, bringing breath, awareness, and emotion into synchrony. This wasn't spirituality. It was preparation, like tuning strings before music. Then came intention, not vague wishing, not affirmations. Intention in the Hermetic sense meant concentrated will, a single focused frequency of thought held without contradiction. Emotion wasn't just present, it was the power source. You didn't just visualize, you felt it. You generated a coherent inner experience so strong, that the energy field began to respond as if it were already real. The ancients knew that reality bends first in the unseen. Voice and breath were the tools of projection. Chanting wasn't random. It was a way to vibrate the body, to activate internal frequencies that aligned with the field. Breath modulated the nervous system, grounding the frequency in physical form. Every inhale was a pull of energy. Every exhale was direction. When harmonized with thought and feeling, it became a transmission, subtle, but far from weak. And what was this technique used for? Not control in the way modern minds interpret it, not for manipulating others. It was used to influence the self, the environment, and the probabilities around you. Health, clarity, emotional mastery. Even the magnetism that draws people or events, these weren't left to fate. They were adjusted, tuned, and directed by those who had learned the method. Not perfectly, not infallibly, but consistently enough that the tradition endured for thousands of years. Of course, the written records are fragmented. Most of the original initiations were oral, ritualistic, experiential. But the remnants we have all point to the same core, that the field around you is programmable, and that you, in your natural state, are the programmer. This is why Thoth's technique has been so heavily mythologized, because if you see it as legend, you won't try to apply it. If you dismiss it as ancient fantasy, you won't remember what your body already knows. Even now, aspects of this method are being rediscovered under different names: neuroscience, bioenergetics, breathwork, vibrational healing, but disconnected from their original context. They're often reduced to hacks or wellness trends. The truth is, this was never about temporary states of calm. It was about transformation. It was about remembering how to consciously interface with the building blocks of reality and how to do so responsibly. Because the field always responds, not to what you say, but to what you hold, to what you believe, to what you emit consistently. Thoth's technique wasn't about performing. It was about becoming. And once you become coherent, focused, and aligned, the external world has no choice but to reflect it. This isn't mysticism. It's the mechanics of mind and energy, hidden for centuries, now waiting to be lived again. Knowledge isn't always hidden in darkness. Sometimes it's hidden in plain sight, buried under ridicule, rebranded as fantasy, or distorted into harmless entertainment. That's exactly what happened to Thoth's teachings. They weren't burned or lost. They were trivialized, stripped of their original context, dressed up in mythology, and shelved in the category of legend. Because if you mythologize something long enough, people stop looking at it as a system and start seeing it as a story. And no one tries to live a story. They just listen, nod, and forget. That was the point. The technique we've been unpacking wasn't forbidden because it was false. It was forbidden because it made control harder. It bypassed institutions. It didn't require temples or clergy or certifications. It didn't ask for permission. It taught that power, real power, starts in the quiet of your own mind. That reality bends to focused energy. That sovereignty isn't something granted by systems. It's something remembered. Control systems, by nature, require disconnection. If you believe your thoughts are private, passive, and powerless, you will look outside of yourself for change. If you believe your body is a random collection of parts, you will surrender your health to someone with a license. If you believe your emotions are irrational burdens, you will repress them until they sabotage your inner harmony. The moment you forget that every part of you is energetic, intelligent, and programmable, you become easier to manage. And let's be clear, this suppression wasn't accidental. When empires rose, they did so not just by conquering land, but by conquering knowledge. The ancient mystery schools didn't just teach ritual. They preserved vibrational science. The temples of Egypt, the initiations in Greece, the Vedic breath practices in India. These were all part of a vast network of energetic understanding. Not belief, but understanding. These cultures didn't worship nature. They studied it, harmonized with it, and mirrored its principles in their own systems. But as power consolidated, decentralized wisdom became a threat. Rome didn't just burn libraries, it replaced them with doctrine. Religion didn't just reinterpret symbols, it rebranded them as sin. The feminine principles of intuition, receptivity, and inner knowing were suppressed. The masculine principles of domination and hierarchy were glorified. And suddenly, energy work became heresy. Inner sovereignty became rebellion. Silence became suspicious. Ritual became blasphemy. And the people forgot. But forgetting doesn't mean the knowledge was lost. It means it was stored, coded into symbols, stories, and architecture. It survived in whispers, in lineages, in dreams. And now, in the age of information, it's resurfacing. Not because it's trendy, but because something in us is ready again. Ready to stop outsourcing power, ready to stop numbing instinct, ready to stop waiting for external change and start generating it from within. Still, the resistance remains. Mainstream science ignores the field. Education trains you to memorize, not remember. Media keeps you overstimulated, undernourished, and emotionally reactive. Every system you interact with daily has been designed to keep your frequency in survival mode. Low, scattered, predictable. Because people in survival don't innovate. They don't question. They don't wake up. But there's a shift happening. Quiet, steady, undeniable. People are starting to feel what can't be measured. They're sensing dissonance in places they used to find comfort. They're questioning narratives that once felt absolute. And they're discovering that the thing they were told to dismiss, their inner sense, their energy, their alignment, is the very thing that changes everything. That's why the technique was forbidden, not because it doesn't work, but because it does. And when you apply it, when you align your mind, your breath, your attention, you stop participating in the old story. You stop being a passive node in someone else's program. You begin creating your own, not with force, but with frequency. Not by escaping the world, but by retuning how you move through it. The truth was never lost. It was only silenced. But silence, like stillness, is just waiting to be heard. At some point, the question shifts from, "Is this real?" to, "Why did I ever think it wasn't?" That shift doesn't come from proof, charts, or credentials. It comes from experience, from the moment you sense that subtle click inside yourself. When the noise fades, the breath deepens, and you realize you're not observing life. You're generating it, not through brute force, but through alignment, through clarity, through a presence so still it begins to pull reality toward it. That's when remembering becomes undeniable. That's when you stop looking for magic and start moving like it. This isn't about becoming something new. It's about shedding what never belonged. The programmed doubt, the conditioned fear, the inherited shame around your own power. You don't need to become enlightened to use energy. You already are energy. The only difference between someone who influences the field and someone who doesn't is awareness. The field is always listening. The only question is whether you're speaking to it deliberately or unconsciously. Reclaiming your power starts with this: accepting that you've always had it, that the subtle sensations you once dismissed, those gut feelings, those flares of synchronicity, those moments of stillness that seemed to stretch time, were not anomalies. They were your signal, peeking through the static. The system trained you to call that intuition coincidence, that clarity a fluke, that alignment luck. But what if it's the default? What if you've just been trained to tune it out? When you reclaim that channel, everything begins to change. Not instantly, not dramatically, but consistently. The way you speak shifts because you're aware of vibration. The way you think becomes more intentional because you understand that thought is transmission. The way you move through the world becomes less reactive, more resonant, and people feel it. They may not know what's different about you, but they'll respond to it. Because coherence is magnetic. You become a living contradiction to the world's programming, not by preaching, but by being calm when others are frantic, clear when others are lost, empowered without needing to overpower. That's the silent revolution. One coherent individual radiates more influence than 100 scattered ones, not because they control others, but because they've stopped being controlled by themselves. And you don't need to master every technique to begin. You just need to get quiet enough to listen, to breathe intentionally, to observe without reacting, to think in frequencies, not just concepts. The mind wants complexity. The field responds to simplicity. Alignment over effort, awareness over knowledge, presence over performance. But if there's ever been a time to start, it's now. Because while you're remembering, others are too. There's a ripple moving through the collective, and it's not loud, but it's potent. People are turning off distractions, questioning norms, feeling the pressure of a reality that no longer fits. That pressure isn't the end. It's the birth canal. The choice is whether you'll resist it or breathe with it, whether you'll numb it or listen, whether you'll keep waiting for someone else to change the world, or finally remember that you are the frequency it's been waiting for. This is not about belief, it's about resonance. If this truth stirs something in you, don't let it fade. Don't scroll past it. Sit with it. Ask yourself, what if I've been powerful this entire time? And then watch what answers come. Not from outside, but from the field you've always been part of. Every ancient tradition, every mystic teaching, every hidden scroll that made it through the fires of time, buried, banned, or burned, says the same thing in different words. You are the vessel, the conductor, the source. What Thoth taught wasn't myth. It was memory, not fiction, but function. A reminder that energy is not something you use. It's something you are. And to forget, that is to live as a shadow in your own life. But to remember, to truly remember, is to step outside the role you were assigned and become the creator you were always meant to be. We live in a world where knowing this makes you dangerous, not because you'll cause harm, but because you'll stop being controlled. A society that profits from your doubt cannot survive your awareness. That's why systems of power work so hard. To keep you numb. Why schools rarely teach stillness. Why science strips out the sacred. Why media replaces wisdom with noise. Because when you see clearly, really see, no one can sell you what you already possess. No one can own what you've reclaimed. And what you're reclaiming now is more than an idea. It's a birthright. Your ability to focus your intent, shift your inner frequency, and create change inside and out isn't reserved for monks, mystics, or chosen ones. It's for you. It always has been. But power without clarity is chaos. That's why teachings like Thoth's were once reserved for the initiated, those who had proven they would use it with purpose, not ego. Not because the knowledge was dangerous, but because the untrained mind is. This isn't about perfection. It's about practice. Energy doesn't need belief to function. It responds to attention, to consistency, to presence. You can start right now, wherever you are. No altar needed, just awareness, breath, intention. Every moment is an invitation to align, to shift the internal before reacting to the external, to listen deeply before speaking, to charge your words with purpose rather than noise. You'll begin to notice the subtle shifts first. People treating you differently without knowing why, random synchronicities, more clarity in chaos. But soon, the changes grow. Health improves, ideas come faster, emotions settle. You start navigating the world as if it's responding to you, because it is, not as a master over it, but as a conscious participant in it. The veil lifts individually. The awakening begins individually, but its true power lies in the collective. That's why they keep us divided, distracted, suspicious, isolated. Because when awakened individuals unite, the system no longer holds. When we stop arguing over illusions and start sinking into truth, a new frequency emerges, one that can't be silenced, bought, or broken. It amplifies, it spreads, and it reshapes reality from the inside out. What did you think about today's video? Feel free to share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If this video opened your mind or helped you see reality in a new light, don't forget to like and subscribe to Top Hidden Knowledge so you never miss our next deep dive into mystery, perception, and the hidden workings of our universe. And
if you have time, explore more videos on our channel. We're just getting started. Until next time, stay curious, stay aware, and never stop questioning the world around you.